Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her face against the cold window of the observation deck. Outside, the enemy ships filled the darkness of space like angry metal stars. She counted them again, though she already knew the number by heart. 43 Zephyrian warships surrounded Kepler Station, their weapons pointed at her home for the past 3 months. The station shook slightly as another warning shot hit the outer shields. Elena grabbed the railing to steady herself. The shields were getting weaker every day. Soon they would fail completely. "Another diplomatic message coming in," announced Commander Trellix, the Altarian who led the station. His blue skin looked pale with worry. "War Prime Thaxar wants to speak with us again." Elena followed the crowd of researchers and officials toward the main conference room. 2,000 beings lived on Kepler Station, representing 12 different species from across the galaxy. They had come here to study the stars and share knowledge. Now, they were trapped. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the image of War Prime Thaxar. The Zephyrian leader looked like a giant lizard standing upright, with sharp teeth and cold yellow eyes. His scales were dark green, almost black, and covered in the ritual scars that showed his rank. "People of Kepler Station," Thaxar spoke in his rough voice, "you have 3 standard months to consider my offer. Now time grows short. Give us your research on quantum fold technology, and we will allow you to leave safely." Ambassador Yellick, a tall Centaurian with 4 arms, stepped forward. "War Prime. We have explained many times that this research belongs to all species in the Galactic Scientific Consortium. We cannot simply hand it over to the Zephyrian Empire." Thaxar's laugh sounded like breaking glass. "Your consortium is weak, Ambassador. Your ships cannot reach you here. Your weapons cannot match ours. What choice do you have but to surrender?" Dr. Venth, the lead scientist from Altair Prime, tried a different approach. "Perhaps we can share some of our other research instead. We have made great discoveries about star formation and—" "I want the fold technology," Thaxar cut him off. "Nothing else matters to me." Elena watched from the back of the room. As the newest member species of the consortium, humans had little say in these talks. The other races saw Earth as a small, backward planet that had only recently learned to travel between stars. She was here only because the station needed a xenobiologist to study alien life forms. The meeting went on for 2 hours. The alien diplomats offered deals, threatened consequences, and pleaded for mercy. Nothing worked. Thaxar remained as hard as the metal walls of his warships. When the meeting ended, Elena walked through the station's corridors. She passed the gardens where Altarian children played, their parents trying to keep them calm. In the research labs, scientists from many worlds worked side by side, still hoping they might find a way out of this trap. The quantum fold research was their life's work. It would allow ships to travel across the galaxy in moments instead of months. Such technology could change everything for every species. But in the wrong hands, it could also be used to build the greatest war fleet in galactic history. Elena found herself in the communications center, where technicians monitored the enemy ships. The Zephyrians were patient, but they were also preparing. Their ships moved in slow patterns around the station, always ready to attack. "They're not just waiting," observed Chief Technician Morrow, a fellow human who had joined the station crew 6 months ago. "Look at these movement patterns. They're studying us." Elena looked at the displays showing enemy ship positions. Morrow was right. The Zephyrians were not simply surrounding them. They were watching, learning, testing the station's defenses in small ways. "What do you think they're really after?" Elena asked. Morrow shrugged. "The fold technology, like they said. But maybe something more. These Zephyrians are smart. They don't do anything without a good reason." That night, Elena could not sleep. She kept thinking about Thaxar's cold eyes during the meeting. There was something in his expression that bothered her, but she could not understand what it was. The station shook again. Another warning shot. The shields dropped another 2%. At this rate, they had perhaps 2 weeks before the shields failed completely. Then Thaxar could take what he wanted by force. Elena got up and walked to her small window. The enemy ships were still out there, dark shapes against the stars. She wondered what the War Prime was thinking as he looked back at them. Was he impatient, angry, or was he simply waiting for the right moment to strike? In the morning, the senior staff held another meeting. The discussion was the same as always. Should they surrender? Could they fight? Was there any hope of rescue? Elena listened, but her mind was elsewhere. She kept thinking about the way Thaxar had spoken, the way he had looked at each species representative. There was something calculating in his manner, as if he was measuring each of them. The meeting ended with no decision. They would try to send another message to the consortium, asking for help. Everyone knew no help was coming. The nearest consortium fleet was months away, and the Zephyrians would not wait that long. As Elena left the meeting, she wondered if this was how it would end. Not with a great battle or a brave last stand, but with a slow surrender, as their shields failed and their hope died. She did not know that everything was about to change. The alarm chimed softly through Kepler Station's corridors. Elena looked up from her research notes, wondering if this was another enemy attack. Instead, she heard the announcement that surprised everyone. Attention all residents. A human cargo vessel has requested permission to dock. The ship identifies itself as the Endurance, carrying humanitarian supplies. Elena dropped her data pad. A human ship? Here? She rushed to the observation deck along with dozens of other curious researchers. Through the thick windows, she could see a small ship approaching the station. It looked nothing like the sleek vessels of other advanced species. The Endurance was built for work, not beauty. Its hull showed the marks of many journeys between distant worlds. Commander Trellix's voice came over the speakers again. The Endurance has been granted permission to dock. Captain Marcus Chen requests a meeting with station leadership. Elena hurried to the docking bay. She wanted to see another human, especially now when their situation seemed hopeless. The airlock opened with a soft hiss, and a man in a simple brown jacket stepped through. Captain Chen looked to be in his 50s, with gray hair and calm brown eyes. He carried himself like a soldier, though he wore no uniform. Behind him came 3 crew members pushing containers of supplies. "Captain Chen," Commander Trellix greeted him. "Thank you for coming, though I must warn you of the danger. The Zephyrians have us under siege." Chen nodded. "I know, Commander. That's why I'm here. These are medical supplies and food concentrates. Not much, but it might help." Elena studied the human captain. There was something steady about him, like a rock in a storm. While everyone else on the station seemed worried or frightened, Chen appeared perfectly calm. "Captain," said Ambassador Yellick, "you should leave quickly. The Zephyrians do not negotiate. They will destroy any ship that interferes with their siege." "I appreciate the warning," Chen replied. "But I'd like to observe your next meeting with them, if that's possible. Maybe I can help somehow." The Altarian commander looked confused. "Help? With respect, Captain, your species is new to the consortium. You have no diplomatic experience with the Zephyrians." "True," Chen agreed. "But sometimes a fresh perspective can be useful. I won't say anything unless asked. I'll just watch and listen." Elena found herself assigned to show Captain Chen around the station while the senior staff discussed his request. As they walked through the corridors, she asked the question everyone wanted answered. "Why are you really here, Captain? This is far from any normal trade route." Chen stopped walking and looked at her carefully. "Dr. Vasquez, isn't it? I read the station reports. You study alien behavior." "Yes, but that doesn't answer my question." "I was passing through this system when I picked up the distress signals," Chen said. "Seemed like the right thing to do. bringing supplies to people in trouble. Elena sensed there was more to it, but Chen changed the subject. Tell me about these Zephyrians. How long have they been here? 3 months. They want our quantum fold research. Everyone's tried to negotiate with them, but War Prime Thaxar won't listen to reason. Chen nodded thoughtfully. What kind of leader is this Thaxar? How does he act during meetings? Cold, calculating. He never shows emotion, never seems uncertain. It's like he's already decided what will happen and is just going through the motions of negotiation. Interesting, Chen murmured, pulling out a small notebook and writing something down. The next meeting with Thaxar was scheduled for that evening. Elena was surprised when Commander Trellix agreed to let Captain Chen observe. The human captain sat in the back corner of the room, saying nothing as promised. Thaxar appeared on the holographic display as usual. His yellow eyes swept across the assembled beings, pausing briefly when he noticed the new human face. "I see you have a visitor," the War Prime said. "Another member of the infant species." "Captain Chen brought us supplies," Commander Trellix explained. "He wished to observe our discussions." Thaxar seemed amused. "Very well. Let him see how real power works." The meeting proceeded like all the others. The various ambassadors and scientists tried different approaches. They offered partial data, suggested compromises, and even threatened to destroy the research rather than hand it over. Thaxar rejected everything. "You have 7 days to decide," he announced. "Surrender the fold technology or we will take it from the wreckage of your station." Elena watched Captain Chen during the entire meeting. He sat perfectly still, occasionally writing in his notebook. His eyes never left Thaxar's image. While everyone else focused on what the War Prime was saying, Chen seemed more interested in how he was saying it. When the meeting ended, the station leaders gathered to discuss their dwindling options. Captain Chen excused himself, saying he needed to check on his ship. Elena followed him to the docking bay. "What did you think of the meeting?" she asked. Chen was quiet for a long moment. "Your War Prime is an interesting character. Very controlled, very precise in his words." "That's what everyone says. He's impossible to negotiate with." "Maybe," Chen said, "but everyone's so focused on what he wants, they're not paying attention to what he's actually doing." "What do you mean?" Chen looked back toward the conference room. "Dr. Vasquez, in my experience, when someone has overwhelming force and a simple demand, they don't usually wait 3 months to use that force. There's always a reason for the delay." Elena felt a chill. "You think he's planning something else?" "I think War Prime Thaxar is a very smart being who doesn't do anything without a good reason. The question is, what's his real reason for being here?" That night, Elena couldn't stop thinking about Chen's words. She reviewed recordings of all the meetings with Thaxar, looking for something she had missed. The War Prime's questions, his reactions, the way he studied each species' representatives. Slowly, a disturbing picture began to form in her mind. Thaxar wasn't just demanding their research. He was learning about them, studying how each species reacted under pressure. But why would he need that information unless he was planning something much bigger than stealing fold technology? Elena realized that Captain Chen might be the only person who understood what was really happening. Tomorrow she would ask him directly what he suspected. She had a feeling his answer would terrify her. Elena woke to the sound of alarms. Her first thought was that the Zephyrians had finally attacked. She grabbed her emergency kit and ran toward the nearest safety station, but the corridors were filled with confused voices, not the panic of battle. "All senior staff report to the command center immediately," came Commander Trellix's voice over the speakers. He sounded stunned rather than frightened. Elena made her way to the command center where she found chaos of a different kind. Technicians stared at their screens in disbelief. Officers spoke in hushed, excited voices. Something impossible had happened. "What's going on?" she asked Chief Technician Morrow. "You're not going to believe this," Morrow said, pointing at his display. "The Zephyrian fleet is powering down their weapons. All of them. At the same time." Elena looked at the tactical screen. The 43 enemy ships that had surrounded them for months were indeed changing their formation. Instead of the tight attack pattern they had maintained, the ships were spreading out and moving away from the station. Commander Trellix stood at the center of the room, holding a communication device with shaking hands. "Attention all residents of Kepler Station. I have received a message from War Prime Thaxar. The Zephyrian fleet is withdrawing from this system immediately." The room exploded in voices. Everyone spoke at once, asking questions that no one could answer. Elena pushed through the crowd to reach the commander. "Sir, what exactly did Thaxar say?" Trellix looked at her with wide eyes. "He said, and I quote, 'The price of victory has become too high. We withdraw with honor intact. The siege is ended.' That's it? No explanation? No demands? Nothing else, they're just leaving." Elena turned to look for Captain Chen, but he was nowhere in the command center. She hurried through the station corridors toward the docking bay. Something told her the human captain would have answers. She found Chen in the Endurance's cargo hold, securing containers for departure. His crew worked quickly around him, preparing the ship for immediate launch. "Captain, wait!" Elena called out. "What's happening? Why are the Zephyrians leaving?" Chen paused in his work and looked at her. His expression was careful, controlled. "I heard the announcement, Dr. Vasquez. Good news for everyone on the station. But you're leaving too. Right now, when everyone has questions. I have deliveries to make. Other people who need supplies." Elena stepped closer. "Captain, I know you're hiding something. Yesterday you said Thaxar had a reason for waiting. Now suddenly he's gone. That's not a coincidence." Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded toward his small cabin. "All right, but this stays between us for now." They sat in the tiny space, barely large enough for 2 chairs and a desk. Chen pulled out his notebook and set it between them. "Dr. Vasquez, what do you know about psychological warfare?" "I study alien behavior, so I understand the basics." "Why?" "During yesterday's meeting, I watched Thaxar very carefully. Not what he said, but how he said it. His body language, his eye movements, the way he responded to different types of pressure from your people." Elena leaned forward. "What did you see?" "I saw a military commander who wasn't really negotiating. He was testing. Every question your ambassadors asked, every offer they made, every threat they issued, Thaxar was studying their responses, learning how each species reacts under stress. Learning for what purpose?" Chen opened his notebook, showing pages of handwritten observations. "To plan a much larger campaign. Think about it. The Zephyrian Empire has been expanding for decades. They've conquered dozens of worlds, but the Galactic Consortium represents hundreds of species with different technologies, different strategies, different ways of thinking." Elena felt cold understanding creep up her spine. "He's been gathering intelligence." "Exactly. This siege wasn't about your fold technology. That was just the excuse. Thaxar has been watching how Altarians handle pressure, how Centaurians make decisions under threat, how each species in the consortium thinks and acts when faced with impossible choices." "But why did he leave? What changed?" Chen closed the notebook. "I made a mistake yesterday. After the meeting, I asked him for a private moment. I wanted to test my theory about what he was really doing here." "What did you say to him?" "I told him that I knew what he was planning. I explained that his siege was really an intelligence operation designed to study consortium species before a larger invasion. I described his strategy in detail." Elena stared at him. "You revealed that you knew his secret plan? Why would that make him withdraw?" Chen stood up and walked to the small porthole, looking out at space. "Because I didn't just tell him that I knew. I demonstrated something much more frightening." "I don't understand." Dr. Vasquez, I predicted his next moves. All of them. I told Thaxar exactly what he planned to do in the remaining days of the siege, how he would escalate pressure, what psychological tactics he would use on each species. I showed him that a human could read his mind like an open book. Elena felt her mouth go dry. You scared him. I terrified him, Chen corrected. Imagine being a military commander whose entire career is built on being unpredictable, always staying one step ahead of your enemies. Then a member of some unknown species casually describes your secret thoughts and future plans, as if they were obvious. But how could you possibly know all that? Chen smiled grimly. Because humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years, Dr. Vasquez. We've learned to read our enemies, to think like them, to predict their moves. It's how we survived on a planet where everything wanted to kill us. And Thaxar realized this? He realized something worse. He realized that if one random human cargo captain could see through his plans so easily, then Earth's military leaders would tear his strategies apart like paper. The Zephyrian Empire's greatest advantage has always been their superior planning and psychology. Against humans who can predict their every move, they would be helpless. Elena stood up slowly, understanding flooding through her. So he withdrew rather than face an enemy who could outthink him. The greatest victory, Chen said, is the one where you never have to fight at all. Outside, the last Zephyrian ships were jumping to hyperspace, their forms disappearing in flashes of light. The siege was over, but Elena knew the galaxy would never be the same. Word would spread about what happened here, about the human who made a war fleet retreat without firing a single shot. Captain Chen began walking toward his ship's bridge. I really do have deliveries to make, Doctor. Take care of yourself. As the Endurance undocked and disappeared into space, Elena realized she was the only person who knew the truth. The question was, what should she do with that knowledge? Elena couldn't let it go. For 3 days after the Zephyrian fleet disappeared, she tried to return to her normal research, but every time she sat down to work, her mind filled with questions about Captain Chen and what had really happened during those final hours of the siege. The other scientists and diplomats had their own theories. Some believed the Zephyrians had received orders to withdraw due to threats elsewhere in their empire. Others thought it was a trap, that the fleet would return with reinforcements. A few suggested that internal politics within the Zephyrian command structure had caused the retreat. None of them suspected the truth. Elena finally made her decision on the 4th day. She requested emergency leave from her research duties and booked passage on a cargo vessel heading toward the trade routes where Captain Chen operated. Commander Trellix was puzzled by her sudden departure but granted the request. It took her 2 weeks to track down the Endurance. She found Chen's ship docked at Freeport Station, a neutral trading post where vessels from many species came to exchange goods and information. Captain Chen looked surprised but not displeased when Elena appeared at his cargo hold. Dr. Vasquez, I didn't expect to see you again so soon. I need to understand what really happened, Elena said without introduction. The explanation you gave me was incomplete. There's more to this story. Chen gestured for her to follow him to a quiet corner of the station's common area. They sat at a table overlooking the busy docking bays, where ships from dozens of species loaded and unloaded their cargo. What do you want to know? Everything. How did you really figure out Thaxar's plan? What exactly did you say to him? And why are you so calm about having changed galactic history? Chen ordered 2 cups of coffee from a serving robot and settled back in his chair. All right, but you might not like all the answers. Try me. Let me start with how I knew what Thaxar was thinking. During my military service on Earth, I specialized in psychological operations. My job was to study enemy commanders, learn their patterns, and predict their actions. After 20 years of that work, you develop certain instincts. Elena leaned forward. What kind of instincts? You learn to recognize the signs when someone is playing a deeper game than they're showing. Body language, word choice, timing, they all reveal things the person doesn't mean to share. Chen pulled out his notebook and opened it to pages filled with observations. Look at these notes from the meetings with Thaxar. Notice how he asked different types of questions to representatives from different species. To the Altarians, he focused on their decision-making processes under stress. With the Centaurians, he tested their military responses to various threats. For each species, he probed different psychological weaknesses. Elena studied the notes. The pattern was obvious once Chen pointed it out. He was building profiles. Exactly. Detailed psychological profiles of every major species in the consortium. Information that would be invaluable for planning an invasion. But how did you convince him to withdraw? What could you possibly have said that would frighten a Zephyrian war prime? Chen's expression grew serious. I made a critical error in judgment, Dr. Vasquez. I underestimated how thoroughly I would terrify him. What do you mean? When I requested that private conversation with Thaxar, my intention was simply to let him know that his intelligence operation wasn't as secret as he thought. I planned to suggest that he withdraw before the consortium discovered what he was really doing. Elena waited for him to continue. Instead, I found myself demonstrating something I didn't expect to demonstrate. I started explaining his psychological profile to him, the way I would analyze any military commander. I described his motivations, his fears, his tactical preferences, even his personal history based on the scars I could see on his scales. You psychoanalyzed him? Completely. I told him about his early military defeats, the way they shaped his current strategies. I explained how his need to prove himself to the Zephyrian High Command drove him to plan increasingly complex operations. I even described the internal political pressures he was facing within his own empire. Elena felt a chill. How could you possibly know all that? Because military minds work in similar ways regardless of species. Ambition, fear, pride, the desire for recognition, these are universal emotions. Once you understand the patterns, you can read anyone. And this frightened Thaxar? Chen nodded grimly. I didn't realize how completely I had stripped away his psychological defenses until I saw his reaction. Here was a being who had spent his entire career being unpredictable, mysterious, always one step ahead of his enemies. Suddenly, a human he had dismissed as irrelevant was describing his deepest thoughts as if reading from a report. So he withdrew because he felt exposed? Worse than that. He realized that if humans could see through him so easily, then his entire military doctrine was useless against us. The Zephyrian Empire's strength comes from their ability to outthink and outmaneuver their enemies. Against a species that could predict their every move, they would be defenseless. Elena sat back in her chair, overwhelmed by the implications. You essentially told him that humans could defeat his entire empire through pure psychological warfare. I told him more than that, Chen said quietly. I made the mistake of mentioning that this kind of analysis was standard training for Earth military officers. That we had thousands of people with these skills. Thousands? Every human who served in our colonial wars learned to read enemy psychology. It was necessary for survival. We've been fighting each other for so long that we've become experts at understanding how minds work under pressure. Elena stared at him. You accidentally revealed that humanity's entire military is trained in psychological warfare. And that, Dr. Vasquez, is why War Prime Thaxar chose to withdraw rather than risk contact with Earth's actual military forces. He realized that the Zephyrian Empire, for all its technological superiority, would be psychologically outmatched by a species of natural war psychologists. But you're just a cargo captain now. Why should he believe you about Earth's military? Chen smiled sadly. Because I demonstrated the skills of what he assumed was an average human civilian. If a retired cargo hauler could dissect his mind so completely, What could Earth's active military specialists do to him? Elena understood now why Chen seemed so troubled by what had happened. You didn't mean to frighten him that badly. I thought I was being clever, finding a diplomatic solution to avoid bloodshed. Instead, I may have made humanity the most feared species in the galaxy. Word will spread about what happened at Kepler Station. Soon every military leader will be wondering if humans can read their thoughts and predict their actions. Elena looked out at the bustling spaceport, where beings from many worlds traded peacefully. That could be a good thing. Maybe they'll think twice before starting wars. Or maybe they'll decide that humans are too dangerous to be allowed to exist, Chen replied. Fear is a double-edged weapon, Dr. Vasquez. Sometimes it prevents wars, and sometimes it causes them. As Elena prepared to return to Kepler Station, she realized that Captain Chen had given her a terrible burden. She now knew a secret that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. The question was, what should she do with that knowledge? Elena returned to Kepler Station with a secret that felt heavier than the cargo containers she had watched being loaded and unloaded at Freeport. For days, she went through the motions of her research, cataloging alien plant samples and writing reports that seemed meaningless compared to what she now knew about humanity's hidden nature. The station had returned to normal life. Scientists worked in their labs, children played in the gardens, and the various species continued their peaceful cooperation. No one spoke much about the siege anymore. It had become just another story, a crisis that had passed without explanation. But Elena noticed things now that she had missed before. When human crew members walked through the corridors, other species stepped aside more quickly than they used to. During meetings, alien colleagues watched human faces more carefully, as if trying to read hidden thoughts. The change was subtle, but it was there. Word was spreading. On her 10th day back, Elena received a message that changed everything. It was from Admiral Sarah Morrison, head of Earth's Deep Space Defense Corps. Elena had never heard of the woman, but the message made it clear that Admiral Morrison had heard about her. Dr. Vasquez, your recent interactions with Captain Marcus Chen have been brought to our attention. We need to discuss the implications of what occurred at Kepler Station. Please report to Earth immediately for a classified briefing. Elena stared at the message, her hands shaking slightly. Earth's military wanted to talk to her. That could only mean one thing. They knew what Chen had done, and they were concerned about the consequences. The journey to Earth took 3 weeks. Elena spent the time trying to prepare for questions she couldn't predict. What would she tell them? How much did they already know? And most importantly, what did Earth's military plan to do with the knowledge that their psychological warfare capabilities had been accidentally revealed to the galaxy? Admiral Morrison turned out to be a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and sharp blue eyes that reminded Elena uncomfortably of Captain Chen's penetrating gaze. They met in a secure conference room deep within Earth's orbital defense station. Dr. Vasquez, thank you for coming. Please, sit down. We have much to discuss. Elena settled into a chair across from the Admiral. I assume this is about what happened during the Zephyrian siege. Indeed, Captain Chen filed a full report about his actions. Quite an interesting read. Morrison opened a tablet and scrolled through what Elena assumed was Chen's account of events. According to his report, he accidentally revealed to War Prime Thaxar that humans possess advanced psychological warfare capabilities. Is that your understanding as well? That's what he told me, yes. He said he analyzed the War Prime's psychology and predicted his actions so accurately that it frightened Thaxar into withdrawing. Morrison nodded. Captain Chen is being modest. We've reviewed the recordings of his conversation with the War Prime. What he accomplished was remarkable, even by our standards. Elena felt confused. Your standards? Admiral? Chen said this kind of psychological analysis was standard training for Earth's military. Morrison smiled, and Elena suddenly felt very naive. Dr. Vasquez, may I ask what you know about humanity's military history? I know we fought many wars before joining the consortium. Chen mentioned colonial conflicts. We've been fighting wars for thousands of years, Dr. Vasquez. Not just colonial wars, civil wars, world wars, wars fought with sticks and stones, and wars fought with weapons that could destroy continents. We've had more practice at warfare than any species in the galaxy. Elena felt a chill creeping up her spine. What are you saying? I'm saying that Captain Chen didn't accidentally reveal our capabilities. He demonstrated them perfectly. Every human who has served in our military does indeed receive training in psychological warfare, enemy analysis, and strategic thinking. It's not because we're naturally gifted at it, it's because we've had to become experts in order to survive our own violent history. Morrison stood and walked to a window overlooking Earth. Do you know why we were so eager to join the Galactic Consortium, Dr. Vasquez? For the benefits of interstellar cooperation? Access to new technologies and knowledge? Those were nice side effects. The real reason was that we were terrified of what we might become if we remained isolated. Humanity's greatest enemy has always been humanity itself. Joining a galactic community gave us something bigger to focus on than our own self-destructive tendencies. Elena began to understand. And now the galaxy knows what humans are capable of. Now, the galaxy knows what one retired cargo captain is capable of. They don't yet understand the full implications. Morrison returned to her seat. Dr. Vasquez, what do you think will happen when other species realize that every human civilian has military training that surpasses their best strategic minds? They'll be afraid. They'll be terrified. And fear makes beings do unpredictable things. Some will try to appease us, offering alliances and concessions. Others will see us as a threat that must be eliminated before we become too powerful. Elena felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. What do you want me to do? Morrison leaned forward. We want you to help us control the narrative. You're one of the few beings who knows the complete truth about what happened at Kepler Station. Your voice will carry weight in scientific and diplomatic circles. What narrative do you want me to spread? The truth, but carefully presented. Yes, humans have psychological insights that other species lack. But we're not invincible war machines. We're a young species that learned harsh lessons from our own mistakes, and we want to use those lessons to help build a peaceful galaxy. Elena considered this. You want me to make humanity seem powerful but not threatening. We want you to help the galaxy understand that our strength comes from hard-won wisdom, not from any desire to dominate others. Captain Chen didn't want to frighten Thaxar. He wanted to save the people on your station. That distinction matters. Over the following months, Elena found herself at the center of a careful diplomatic campaign. She spoke at scientific conferences, wrote papers about human psychological capabilities, and met with representatives from dozens of species. Always, she emphasized the same points. Humans were skilled at understanding others because they had been forced to understand themselves, and they used this knowledge to prevent conflicts rather than start them. The response was mixed. Some species, particularly those who had suffered under Zephyrian aggression, welcomed humanity's emergence as a galactic power capable of deterring future attacks. Others remained suspicious, forming defensive alliances and increasing their military spending. But gradually, a new balance emerged. The Galactic Consortium evolved to include humanity not as junior members, but as respected mediators and strategic advisors. Human psychologists and negotiators became sought-after consultants for diplomatic missions and conflict resolution. Elena often thought about Captain Chen during these months. His mistake had indeed changed galactic history, but perhaps not in the way he had feared. Humanity had been revealed not as conquerors, but as the species that had learned to conquer itself. She never saw Chen again, though she heard reports of his cargo ship appearing wherever conflicts threatened to erupt across the galaxy. Always bringing supplies, always observing quietly, always helping to find peaceful solutions before violence could begin. Elena realized that this had been humanity's destiny all along. They were not meant to be the galaxy's warriors or its rulers. They were meant to be its counselors, the species that understood the darkness in every heart because they had faced that darkness in their own. The human was only a spectator until the moment when being understood became more frightening than any weapon. And in that moment, the galaxy learned that sometimes the greatest power is simply knowing how others think. Elena smiled as she finished her latest report. The title read, Psychological Insights in Interspecies Relations: How Understanding Prevents Conflict. It wasn't as dramatic as the day humanity scared a war fleet into retreat, but it was the truth that mattered. And truth, Elena had learned, was the most powerful weapon of all.